Maybrook is going to hit the buttons and he's moving the camera so you can see me. And here I am, and I'm talking into the microphone. This should. All right, I'm going to turn off this microphone.
Okay. Good evening and welcome. I get the wonderful pleasure of filling in for Mike Tropiano this evening. So welcome to the Wednesday, March 9th, 2022 Pembroke School Committee meeting. This is being recorded, so it can go out in our notes or website tomorrow, if that's the official word. If you have any questions, scinfo@Pembroke K12.org, and the superintendent will keep an eye on all that wonderful stuff. If you have any questions, again, please feel free. We have a visitor out there. Thank you for coming. So nice to see you. There are no adjustments to the agenda I'm aware of. And
You just have to call the meeting to order.
I thought I did. Did I say? Any motion to call to order?
I don't
No,
remember.
I think,
I think it said
Just the
call to order.
time, it's 7:01.
Oh, it's 7:01.
Yep.
I'm
All
sorry,
right, yep.
7:01.
For
So,
Natalie, yep.
again, I apologize. First time actually chairing the meeting. So,
Perfect.
And where would you like to start?
We are going to start with communications. So in your packet, you have a copy of the request from Senator Moran's office. I included for you the Google form that she is asking districts to fill out as far as budget request priorities. I also gave you a little spreadsheet, which is in the next section of that packet. It outlines what we have asked for in the past. So anytime we've had an opportunity to talk to our legislative representatives, whether it's Representative Cutler, Senator Moran, or in the past Senator DiMacedo, we've often spoken with them about the full funding of Circuit Breaker, the tuition piece, as well as the transportation piece. Transportation is spelled wrong, but, and you see there the amounts for those to be reimbursed at 100%. They are currently in the funding formula to be reimbursed at 75% for the traditional circuit breaker and 50% for transportation. In addition, we've also asked in the past for some funding associated with vocational transportation. So many of you know that regional transportation is funded through the Chapter 70 formula through reimbursement. You can argue that vocation is the biggest form of regional education. So we have asked in the past for the same type of funding to be carved out for vocational transportation as is regional transportation. I also included a letter that the committee had sent back in 2017 to Representative Cutler and Senator DiMacedo just to explain a little bit more about some of the vocational pieces. So we have the transportation piece, and then we also generally ask for a cap to the tuition increases for vocational tuition. So you can see in that handout that the tuition rates at some of our vocational schools and agricultural schools rise at a percentage higher than our budget ever increases. And the ask in the past has been to cap those tuition rates at 120% of the per pupil spending amount for each district. So that would mean that the tuition rates would vary depending on the district the student was coming from instead of a set rate. So there's no necessary dollar figure ask for that. That's a change in legislative language that we've asked for in the past. And anytime we've had the opportunity to speak with representatives, they always ask us to ask for something that is unique to Pembroke, because as you can see, many people would benefit from the change in circuit breaker, transportation, and the vocational pieces we talked about. So I thought it would be prudent to ask for, I think they lovingly call them pothole grants at the state level, but a pothole grant associated with some of the pathways that we're looking for at PHS. So $100,000 for programming at the high school that is not really considered Chapter 74 and covered under that piece of the formula. Those are what we've asked for in the past. I didn't know if there was anything else folks wanted us to add. As you saw from the note that came into the school committee mailbox from Senator Moran, the requests are due March 18th. So I know Mike wanted to make sure that you all talked about it tonight so that we could go in and fill out the form prior to that deadline.
Erin, are you aware of any districts that are asking for any type of, I don't even know what the proper word, funding, I guess, to help us with kind of the unique situation we have right now? When I look at transportation, I'm also thinking about right now the cost of transportation or the cost of any of our capital type improvements that might be based on petroleum products. Because of that very recent huge increase. And also, are there any districts considering some sort of making us whole because of the extreme inflation situation that we're all working on? I mean, it's not really unique to Pembroke, either of those.
Right.
So I hesitate to ask, but at the same time, it's a unique situation, I think, for every district, and it could impact we're looking at budget numbers that could be distinctly different in another 2 weeks.
Right. I haven't seen anything globally about inflation. I know that all transportation contracts include a fuel clause, so there is a percentage spelled out that the amount can go up within the contract year and over the life of the contract with the provider. So that is already in our current transportation contracts. I can look around and see if there's any language out there associated with kind of, mitigating inflation. I'm
At
not
least
sure
for
how you
like
put a
a-
figure on it.
I guess, I go back to my old days of where we kind of had a cap, a stop on kind of stopping the bleeding, per se. Yeah, on contracts I did with my clients tied to different things that, there was a point where, sort of like hitting your deductible on your insurance plan. Once you hit the deductible, then somebody else kind of steps in to pick up the rest. I don't know
Yeah,
if we have
Chapter
any-
30B prohibits some of that, right? So Chapter 30B is kind of the bidding process used for contracts, services, construction, that type of stuff. You have to go with the lowest, most responsive and responsible bidder, which is how we end up in transportation contracts. There's not usually a clause in there for, if things go crazy, here's where we stop.
Right, I
but-
hate to
but
ask it, it's part of my
right.
learning curve, but at the same time, I'm betting some of our families are probably thinking
Right,
the same
a lot
thing.
of our increases are based off the consumer price index, so as that fluctuates, obviously with inflation, our contractual rates will fluctuate as well. I'm happy to put together a list for you guys of what we have that's dependent on that CPI, so you can see kind of where our, unknown liability is at this point with some of those things.
Okay.
Not necessarily sure how you would ask for that from the budget request. If you look at what she's looking for you to fill out,
Yeah,
that would be a tough one to
Yeah,
articulate.
Yeah,
but-
because I went through the questions, and I'm like, I don't even know how to put it in, but I
Yeah.
thought, well, at least I could ask the question, we could think about it, something we have to think about anyway.
Yeah, and this comes back a couple times over the year. So the pothole grants, like I said before, are something that come up again in the fall too. So if we figure out a way to articulate what we're asking for in that perspective, that's also something we could go back and ask them again for when we have them come in later in the spring and then again in the fall.
Okay, thanks.
Aaron, do they want us to do this individually or just as a school committee and kind of submit one form?
So I'll fill it out for you guys. If you decide that these are what you'd like to ask for,
Okay.
each one would be an individual budget request. That's the way the form is set up. But, I think we talked about asking for what we've asked for in the past and then throwing in that, something that's unique to Pembroke, so.
Okay. And then just following up on Susie's question, this gas thing seems to be kind of ending nowhere in sight. Do we have enough of a cushion built in?
Yeah, so our fuel clause in our first student contract is 3%, and it's based off of the average of the consumer price index from the previous 12 months. So it takes a little while before the increase that we're seeing at the gas pump to really translate to a cost increase for us in our contracts. But that'll become an issue when we start talking about what the rate is for next year.
Okay.
Because we will be in our first of 2 option years with first students. So we're at the last year of our 3-year contract. We have 2 option years where obviously the percentage increases are not spelled out in the option years. So.
Okay. Sue, anything, or Lance?
No, I support this, and I like the fact that, like you said, all of us are going to be asking to get our full funding from the state, but putting in the specific Pembroke angle, I think is an important thing, because that'll help things stand out. So
It's worth a shot, right?
I'm in support, yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Well, thanks for putting this together, and especially thanks for the background for the years prior to our being on the board. So I
So
appreciate
I'll
it.
submit this on your behalf with the priorities that we just talked about.
Awesome.
And I think I did skip one thing, the approval of the bill schedule. I know they're circulating. I signed them. I'm not sure who else, where they are in the process. Do we want to do the meeting minutes, or is just did it? Okay. Consideration of approval, guys, school committee meeting minutes, March 1st, 2022. I'll take a motion.
So moved?
Second.
Motion by Lance, second by Sue. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, 4-0. Mike's not here, so that one's an easy one. Superintendent, next we're going to move on to the budget
Sure.
presentations.
I'm going to start with the elementary budget presentation. So you all have had the opportunity to meet Mr. Murphy before and Ms. Simmons. They were here earlier in the fall for another presentation. I don't know if you've met Mrs. Swift. She's the principal here at North. She had a lovely baby earlier in the summer, so she is finally back with us
Congratulations.
full time.
Welcome back.
And she's super excited to be here to talk about the elementary budget. So I think Mike is going to start, but they're going to share the presentation. So it's one presentation for all 3 elementary
Actually gonna
schools
stand
together.
it up on you a little.
Ooh, you're going to start.
We're
Look
gonna-
at you. Make sure you have the clicker.
Mike, you okay with that? Mike, you good?
Yeah.
He's getting comfortable too.
And I'm just gonna say, if I stumble over my words, I'm sleep deprived, the baby's teething, so apologize in advance. So we're gonna start by just sharing our enrollment numbers. These are current as of today. North's number is a little bit higher, but keep in mind that North houses the preschool, which currently has 68 students. So I'm gonna go over a little bit of our historical information with some enrollment numbers, and then Jen will go over some data that we have in terms of interventions that are currently in place at the 3 elementary schools, and then Michael will share some of our priorities for the budget for fiscal year '23. So these are our current elementary class sizes. You'll notice that the numbers range from 17 to 24. We have mostly 3 sections at each grade level, with the exception of 1 section of 4 at North and 1 section of 4 at Bryantville. Looking at next year, the numbers stay fairly similar in range, but if you look at our kindergarten numbers, some of those have increased from the previous year. So particularly if you look at Bryantville, we're currently at 70, which for 3 sections, which is what we're at right now, would be 23 students in each class. Hobbamock is currently at 65. That number at North is pretty significant with 86, so if we were to keep the 3 sections that we have now, it would be an average class size of 28. I think that the number is wrong up on that screen. It is corrected in your packets though, which obviously is not a manageable class size, so we're gonna keep our eye on these numbers, and if it's something that we need to add a section or a teacher, we will bring that back to you as part of the admin recommended budget.
Right, so there's a lot of movement in those kindergarten numbers. Those generally start with the census information that we have, assuming that everybody that's age 5 is going to be enrolling in kindergarten. As we get through kindergarten registration, that really ramps up in March. We'll have a better idea of those numbers, but we obviously are not proposing running sections of 28 for kindergarten here at North. We would bring that back. By the time we come back with the admin recommended budget, in the early weeks, middle of April, we would add a teacher as a requirement as opposed to a priority one. It would be a need to have, like when we talked about some of the student services stuff in a couple weeks.
So we're gonna just review our current focus areas, and I believe, Jen, you taking this one? All right.
Hi. So currently, and I think over the past few years, even prior to COVID, we've really been working on some of these targeted areas. Reading acquisition, really trying to provide targeted instruction through the reading specialists. This year we have the ability to use interrupted learning tutors, and we are excited that classrooms are starting to shift back to using small reading groups within the classroom, so that the interventions are not just outside of the classroom, but also within. Currently, we have 1.5 reading specialists, so every building has it half-time. We are looking at the reading program from K to 2. The remote learning last year really allowed us to see some different programs that were being utilized across the elementary schools, and we want to make sure that we're pulling from the best and streamlining that. So that's what the purpose of this team has been looking at through this entire school year so far. We are looking to expand our social emotional supports to students displaying difficulty attending the classroom instruction. This is sometimes behavioral, it's sometimes emotional, it's sometimes seemingly just their lack of readiness, stamina, and exposure within the classroom. We're especially looking to promote school readiness in kindergarten. And in 6th grade, we began a change with the curriculum with the Open SIAD program, and we're hoping to expand that next year. Especially at kindergarten, what we're noticing is readiness inequities. We have students that are attending preschool. We have students that have not attended preschool. We have students that, especially with the impact of the pandemic, have not been getting the typical exposure to skills, which is causing an increased need for social emotional support. We are still teaching with that academic expectation that is now kindergarten, and without them coming with that pre-academic base, that's causing some gaps. The Title I in reading intervention support, I think Bryanville's only there in parentheses because we're the only one who technically is a Title I school currently, but that's based on the free and reduced lunch. So because that was free for everyone this year, we wonder, North was last year, but not this year. So if that were to be removed next year, it'll be curious to see what our numbers are. And we are excited that we will be able to do spring screenings this year. We were unable to do it in person with our kindergarten students, so this year we'll actually be able to go through the screening process and really have a good idea of the incoming students and their needs. This year, currently, the IST team and the SST team, so each building, there's a team of teachers and admin that works on instructional, but then also the social emotional supports as well. So the referrals throughout this year so far, IST has been, between 10 and 16 between each of the buildings. The SST, the student support team, is higher. That's based more on the social emotional need of the students. And as you can see, the concern that they're being referred to, the majority of the students are both a reading and a math issue. It's not really separated out. And our social emotional numbers are very high as well. And then currently, the intervention supports that are being utilized, the halftime reading specialists are being able to service at Bryanville 23 students. We are only able to access the students grades 1 to 2 currently. Havelock has 26 grades K to 2, and North has 29. Are you 1 to 2, K
Yes.
to 2?
Yep.
And then the interrupted learning tutors, we've been trying to get over at Bryanville. We were trying to, bang for the buck. So we did groups of students that would only meet 2 days a week instead of the whole 4, to try to get some more kids through that process. So we've been able to work with 52 students so far. Havelock, they're at 31, but I believe you did the 4 days a week. And North was 51. But those interrupted learning tutors have allowed us all to get to working with kindergartners faster than we typically would have been able to with just the reading specialists. So that was very helpful. It's your turn.
Great. I'm just going to go back to one slide, sorry. Just so you can get a better idea of the numbers for students accessing the reading specialist. Just to put it into perspective, when a reading specialist is teaching a group of kids, it's generally speaking about 4 or 5 kids in with the reading specialist at a time. And it's really kind of direct instruction with that group of kids. And it runs for about a half an hour. So we're talking about half a position in each of the elementary schools at this point. So we talked at the beginning of the summer about really kind of delegating those resources, obviously, to kindergarten through grades 2 to start out, because that's where the biggest need was, with the hope that at some point we can kind of get into the upper grades as well, even those 3s and 4s, grades 3 and 4. So just kind of wanted to point to that picture, that idea of that. And then Jen was actually able to pull all this data off of some of our platforms, our math platforms and our reading platforms. So we use Lexia for reading. So this kind of gives you a snapshot of where the kids are and where they were. So it shows you the nice flow from where we were in 2017 when we really started to ramp up the Lexia. About 47% of the students were above grade level at that point in time, 37% on, and 16% below. And then what you do is you come down to the current situation. You have about 12% of the kids above, 50% of the kids on, 30% of the kids below. This is just one indicator. I don't want to get anybody nervous. It's just one indicator. But we thought it was important just to kind of share, because this is the type of work that happens in the classrooms on a daily basis. The kids are able to log on to Lexia for 20 minutes a day, They can also do it online at homework for homework pieces, so they're very used to it, and most of our students are utilizing the proper amount of time on that. So it's a pretty reflective percentage there of our student population. So that's the Lexia data. Just rolling into our priorities for the elementary schools and the three elementary school principals, we talked quite extensively about where we're at and trying to find those common threads. And what we're finding right now is the biggest need right now would be the reading. Whether it's the gaps because of the shutdowns and the interrupted learning, the reading specialist is key. We're seeing great successes with the services that are put into place with the reading specialist. We all get weekly printouts from our reading specialists, and we can see the progression over time of where those kids were and where they're going. So it's a really effective service, probably because it is such a small student-to-teacher ratio, which is great. So again, we have 1.5 reading specialists right now. We would be looking to get to have a 1.0 in each of the buildings. We'll be looking to get. The other thing that we'll be taking a look at would be the therapeutic intervention resource room. So that's a very big name for something that is pretty simple in terms of what we'd like to do. We all have some struggling learners, whether they be general education students or students identified as special education, that are having difficulty accessing the general classroom on a daily basis. There's not a ton of them, but there's enough that we're feeling the stretch right now, where we are thinking that if we could potentially put a small resource type of program together, utilizing some of the supports that are already in our buildings with a small ask, and I'll get to that in a minute, this might go a long way. So I'll explain it in just a second. And then, so we talked about priority ones and then talk about priority twos. So the priority two would be, if we could ask for everything, we'd love to have an additional paraprofessional to support our kindergarten classrooms. We're all running classrooms close to 22 students at this point in time. And as Jen was talking about, the needs of the kids have definitely, risen over time. And the kids are not as ready to learn as they used to be, but that's our job and we're ready to do that. But it would be very helpful to have that extra set of hands in the classroom as well. So we'll be talking about adding a 1.0 paraprofessional to each of the school buildings, which would be shared between the kindergarten classrooms. Okay. Sorry that came out like that. But the idea of this therapeutic intervention resource room would really be to, we'd be potentially contracting with an outside agency just for some support around, because this has been done before in other school districts. And we just want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. I can tell you what this is not. This is not a place for students to go and to remain there for the entire school day when they're having a difficult time. This is for those kiddos that come into our school building, they come off the bus, and they are just not ready to learn, okay? These are a lot of times, these are the kids that end up in our school psychologist's office, our school social worker's office, the principal, the vice principal's office, just for some, therapeutic support, some, maybe just a shoulder to hang their head on. But what we're looking to do is, we don't want to see those kids miss class time. So we have some ideas, a few ideas of how to kind of mirror some of that instruction within a small group in a different location than the classroom, where some of the social pressures are extended because of the fact that when you're sitting in a 4th grade classroom, just say, and you have 22 other students in your classroom and you're not feeling your A game, when you're looking around, you realize you're not like some of those other kids. So if you could potentially go to a place that had a therapeutic support person there, which I would say would be our school social workers, which we have already invested in, and we already have a 1.0 in every single building, that paired with a paraprofessional, and I'll get to the staffing in a minute, that paraprofessional could actually break out and work individually with that student to get them where they need to be in order to return to class. So this is a short stopgap measure. It might be for 20 minutes. It might be for an hour and 15 minutes. The idea is to get them ready and back into class to be with their peers and learning with their teacher. So that's what the whole idea of this would be. And it's difficult to do, there's no question about it, but we have some good ideas. There's some other agencies on the outside that I've worked with before that actually have quite a bit of extensive knowledge in this, so we'd be looking to potentially just tap them for some ideas of how to make this work in our building. I've talked to a school social worker about ways that we could potentially integrate her into the mix. And I think that the way you both utilize your social workers, we could easily switch this into that type of method as well. So that's a little bit about the vision. And again, we'd be looking for not only social workers, the social workers already there, just kind of utilizing them in a different capacity in our buildings. And also adding a paraprofessional who will be trained in de-escalation techniques to get kids ready back into the classroom. So the idea is, if math class is starting off in 4th grade and Joey comes into class and not ready to learn, that syllabus is already right there in front of them. That child knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing and actually can be taught the steps in order to solve that math problem. And now they're not behind the 8 ball and getting stressed out when they go back in. So that's what we're dealing with right now. These are great kids too. These are kids that they're very, very bright, but they're just having a really difficult time for whatever reason. And again, this is not just our special education staff, special education students. This is also some of our gen ed students as well. So that's a little bit about the therapeutic program. And then some of the other things that we'd have to kind of iron out, which we've already thought about, would be some of that, who comes and who goes into this type of therapeutic resource room. How is that determined? So we have to have some entrance and exit criteria established. We need a classroom space, which I think we've all identified at this point. And then a communication tool that can be utilized with that support person back to the teacher. So when that child returns back to the classroom, what was covered, and are there any questions that student now still has that you can maybe get back in touch with during Titan time or something like that later on in the day. So that communication tool needs to work with both the therapeutic resource room but also the teachers. And then a tracking database to see how many kids are being referred in there, so we can kind of take some real-time data, report back to you, tell you how it's going. And then I talked to Jessica just about potentially having a 6 to 8 week central office review of that support program, making sure that it's in line with your vision, our vision together collectively. So that's kind of what we've been thinking about. Any questions regarding anything that we've talked about?
I have a quick one, if you don't mind.
Sure.
With the room, theoretically, could you have a 1st grader and a 6th grader in the same room at the same time?
So potentially, and what we could do, when you take a look at the classroom, we'd be talking about maybe breaking up that classroom.
Yeah.
So in having 2 support people in there, having the social worker in there and a paraprofessional in there, we could potentially work with those kids individually. Or if you had a couple of 1st graders, having the paraprofessional work with that one, and then the social worker with the 6th grader. So more of a partition type of a situation.
Right, the grade span for education is 48 months, so you couldn't be educating the 1st grader on math at the same time as the
Oh, no.
Right, that's what I was
6th
trying to
grader on
figure
math.
that.
You have to split it.
That's what I just wanted to clarify. Susan?
Yeah, looking back with the readiness issue, especially for those coming into kindergarten, we've talked a lot with the higher grades and some of the things we've done on breaks to kind of help with the learning loss. Are there any plans or ways we can help families to maybe have our incoming kindergartners a little more ready? Are there things like, how we send packets home and things like that? I don't know, what are your plans tied to that, if any? Is there anything to do with that to kind of maybe help alleviate some of those that might use this, if this is a room we can create?
Absolutely. I mean, those are definitely discussions that we have when we meet with the kindergarten parents coming up in April and May. We already have those scheduled. Those are all the parent questions. They usually are right in here in this room, and they're asking questions like, where does my child get dropped off on the first day of school? How much is a lunch at school? We're going to take it a step further and saying, these are the things that we really need your kids to learn how to do prior to coming in a perfect world. But at the same time, we're going to take everybody. So we have talked about kind of those precursor skills that we would need to have in place, and we want to be able to talk to the parents about that and potentially eventually provide some training to parents on that.
Thank you, because I'm concerned because, we've had a couple of years, I have a grandson, and there's just, childcare in general is limited. COVID made it incredibly limited, and a lot of those little preparation skills and things that they pick up in those environments that help for our team of professionals here when we bring them into kindergarten, they're just going to be lacking. It could be 2 to 3 years worth of developmental skills. So I just am worried. I'm worried that it's another wave of an issue that we're going to need to address. So I appreciate that you're already, I knew you'd be out in front of it already. I had to ask.
Sue, any questions?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I think it's a great idea. I think the kids really need that way to de-escalate in order to go back. really is really needed, and I hope that we have the budget for it, so, but it's a great idea.
Lance?
Yeah, again, thank you for all the presentation this evening. Space, we see growth in the kindergarten, so we still think we're good space-wise to be able to designate space for that, which is great. So if I understand correctly, we're looking to bring in a contractor to guide us, teach the social workers and the psychologists in the school, but really we'll carry that out, but they'll help guide us in how to properly set that up, how to,
Correct.
like
And the
you
person
said.
to kind of go to when the questions do kind of arise, what did you do in this type of situation? Have that back and forth conversation.
Is there any other districts that do a similar concept?
There are. Actually, my last district in the Boston Public Schools, we have done this. I do know that other schools in the South Shore have TLC programs that are set up similar to this. Has a different name, maybe has a different person running it. So maybe not utilizing a school social worker. They may have a general education teacher running it. So to answer your question, yes, it's been done in other places. And
Nice, so there's other resources to
Absolutely.
tap into if you need to.
100%.
Perfect. And then, so just so I understand too, the additional 3 paraprofessionals that we would also train are separate from the kindergarten ones that we want to add in?
That is correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anyone else? Was it?
Thank you.
Thank you for that. That was outstanding. Appreciate it. Donna, do you get to go next, or?
I guess.
How are things without all the masks and all that stuff? Is that,
They got to do it before everyone else.
yeah?
Yeah, it was nice the week before, yeah, it was good. Right. Yeah, I was trying to, so a mix of masked and unmasked pictures. Is that cute? All right. So just kind of went through what I was going to be going through here. It's just a roadmap.
Donna, just make sure you speak into the microphone so people at home can hear you.
Sure. Okay. So this is the enrollment, and you can see from the graph that the last few years have been fairly steady, and we would, we had a big bump like 9-10 years ago, but now there's been some stabilization of that. We expect about the same number of students next year as we have this year. And then class sizes, and I apologize because it's really small for you guys. and I'm
They
not
have it
sure
in
you-
print,
We
it's a
got
little
it
bit
in print,
larger.
so I have
Oh,
that.
you do? Do you have
Yeah.
the most updated
Yeah.
one?
Whatever you updated 41 minutes before the meeting.
I was there and I thought I could just do a little more on this. So in general, the class size averages look pretty good for the middle school. I mean, there's times they've been higher. So I think we're running from the low 20s to the high 20s as an average. And then I also think the other thing that it looks different this year is the class size range is a little tighter. And I do think the class size range is because having kind of more structured electives allows us to be a little more efficient with the schedule. So.
Great, just to stop for a second, because some people are newer to the committee. So for the past 6 years or so, we've been trying to nominalize the class size range of the middle school. So we have sections of 14 and sections of 32 back-to-back for teachers. So I think, Donna and the staff of the middle school has done a ton of work to make those class size averages actual class size numbers, as opposed to, truly the average. So, it's the schedule at the middle school has so many moving parts, and it is quite difficult to schedule at the middle school, but I do think that the staff there have gotten to a place where we're able to run an efficient schedule for students and for staff,
Totally
which was
agree.
something we've been working for a long time.
Much more efficient. So that first graph, that's our current 7th grade, and for the most part, that'll roll over into 8th grade, and that's what it'll look like next year for the 8th grade students. For the 8th grade, same thing, we're running, we see a 30 there, but they're running mostly in the mid-20s, and again, the ranges are relatively tight. The 8th grade numbers, it's going to be what our new 7th graders look like, so that's what it's going to look like in 7th grade next year, we would anticipate. So again, I think really reasonable class sizes.
Aaron, to that end, does the 8th grade have less electives? Is that why we're closer to the average?
No,
There's like 23, there's a little bit.
the grade is a little bit smaller
Yeah.
than the 7th grade.
Gotcha.
And then the numbers for the world language classes, again, for the most part, the numbers look great, running in the low teens to the high 20s. And the high 20s is one French class we offer, so that went into one section. This is some of the work I did about an hour ago. So, I just wanted to give you the Titan time numbers, so you see the average and the number of sections for Titan time. Is that 23? No, that can't be right. I did that wrong. I think that's supposed to be 13. Yeah, I think that should be 13, not 20. I'm just not seeing it correctly. And then the band, there is the 31 students, but what we do is we put it into two sections. So there's certain days you're only seeing some of the kids, and then there's days there's crossover. So there's two sections, but they kind of overlap, who's able to target different areas of the band. That's how Tom Hovey wants it, and that's why there's two sections of Band 7 and two sections of Band 8, because he feels like it's more effective instructionally with that model. You see the Title I numbers, which are relatively small, just like when they talked about the Bryanville numbers, instructionally small classes to support ELA and math. And then I gave you the social studies and science and music electives that most students are taking, so you can just see what the numbers look like. And then you see the same for the 8th grade. And
Are
then
the band numbers lower, Donna?
the band numbers are, they were a little bit higher this year. They're relative, they've been trending a little. I mean, I think after the last couple of years, I think it's been hard.
I was wondering if they were coming back up at all for us.
Yeah, I think we're hoping they'll come back. Certainly, we always encourage students, I mean, even when they go into 7th grade, students often think about, oh, I think I might drop it. Don't drop it.
Yeah.
You spend a couple of years, like, stick with it. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think it gives them a really good social group, and I think.
Right, before band was one of the only electives you got, right? Now you have some exposure to get other electives
Right.
if you're in the band. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit more choice for those students, and there has
Yeah.
been in the past, which I think when Gwen shared her numbers, you can see the numbers of the middle school actually have come up a little bit with that choice in there for kids, because if you were on the band track, that was all you got for an elective. It was
Yeah.
band for the full
Well,
year.
And is band year-round versus a
Yes.
period?
Yes.
Because that was
Yeah.
some of the questions
Yes.
that my child had. So
Exactly. So
that
it
made
become-
that made his decision for.
Yes, yes. So we haven't lost as many numbers with the band since we went to the term electives. That was another kind of bonus. So I just went through some of the budget reductions we've done in previous years. So this is just the visual that kind of highlights why we had taken away Latin as the middle school offering. It really became unsustainable as a budget item. And then the elective model restructure that we talked about. So we reduced a music teacher, that person went to a different building. And then our science and social studies teachers began teaching an elective. So instead of teaching 5 sections a day of science and social studies, they went to 4 sections a day in one elective. But in spite of that, still reasonable class sizes, like in an efficient way to manage the budget. And we had a reduction of a STEM lab teacher, and we just, well, I'm not gonna read it to you because you've already read it. And that person just was reassigned. And then, because it can get confusing, I just kind of did the visual on how the electives work and how they rotated the term electives, and then highlighted who teaches them, so you would see that piece. I'm probably gonna steal this and put it in my presentation for 6th to 7th grade parents after I did it for you guys. So this is the 7th grade options, or they can do band 7. And then in 8th grade, they have 3 of the same in that term rotation, and then 8th grade on team 8-1 get general music, and students on team 8-2 get guts.
Like the name.
What a great name.
And that is just a function of Tom Hovey teaches 5 sections, and he wasn't able to teach it, and we were able to like squeeze out a section from a STEM teacher, so that's how we kind of manage it to be, again, to think about being efficient, but also have good offering. 8th grade has the offering of band, and then they have a fundamentals of art, which is a year-long course that is like a pre-honors art class. And then we did a Title I restructure, where we reduced a Title I literacy teacher, and we redistributed those to the ELA teachers. And same thing with the Title I math supports, we redistributed them to the math teachers. So now, instead of 5 sections of ELA, it would be 4 sections of ELA, either accelerated or standard, and 2 sections of literacy enrichment, because it gets taught every other day.
Donna, for those sections, do students see the teacher that they have for ELA or math?
So because 7th grade's a little bit bigger than 8th grade, we were looking at the numbers a lot with English when we were building the schedule, and we felt like we could get all the Title I students into one ELA teacher and one math teacher. So in 7th grade, they all see the 7-2 teachers for Title I, and then we built an extra section in 7. They see the 7-2 teacher, so there was an extra ELA section to keep the numbers clean. But in 8th grade, because the 8th grade numbers are a little smaller, we're able to have it with their teacher, so the ELA and math teacher in 8th grade. So both sets of teams have the
Right, so
Title I
for people that are following along at home, you leave 6th grade from a 90-minute math block and go to the middle school in 7th grade where you have 47 minutes of math. And for some of our students, they need more math than that. So in this model, they're getting closer to the 90, 94 minutes of math, which has some tremendous benefits for those students. I think the model in its purest form when we first rolled it out was for students to be seeing their math and English teacher whenever possible, so
Yeah.
that it's a double dose of that same instruction.
Yeah. And students that take Title I at the middle school level are taking it in place of a world language, so we're just trying to give extra support before they move on to high school when they would add in a world language then. And then just going through, again, we talked earlier this year about the social emotional behavioral needs of the students, so I had my counseling mental health staff kind of lay out the reasonings for the referrals they're getting. And as you can see, emotional management is one of the biggest ones, as well as social skills, deficits, and friendships. Just another way to look at the distribution of students. So the bulk of students are.
Donna, use your teacher voice, come on.
I'm sorry.
You can do it.
I have a soft voice. I can talk long, but it's soft. The majority of students that they see are the general ed students. The second being IEP students that have counseling on their required educational plan, and then smaller numbers of students that are on 504s or IEPs without counseling. So that's just the distribution of students we're seeing for counseling. And this is just the minutes per cycle. So you can see that there's been a significant increase from last year to this year in the required minutes of counseling on IEPs, which is just another indicator of the increased need we're seeing social, emotionally, and behaviorally, I think, across the board. And these are my budget requests. So I have 2.5 social workers currently, which is wonderful. But my goal would be to get 1 full-time person for continuity and consistency across the week.
So just a
I'm
reminder
asking
that
to go
half
from a-
of the guidance counselor is funded through some of the ESSER grant
Yeah.
money that we have that we know expires. So what Donna's asking is for that to be built into our operating budget moving forward, so that there's
Yeah.
some stability in the position.
And hire for that. And then enriching student software is a scheduling software. We didn't, teachers had asked to not use it last year. They felt like they just didn't need it, but as a year, we go further into the year and kids having academic needs, they found that tool would be really helpful again to manage students that need to go elsewhere during Titan time, based on.
And that is the software that we use at the high school.
At the high school, yep,
Titan
and we
time.
had it up until last year, yep. And then the other budget request is we want to get a terraponic growing racks. So we have some leadership students who have been working with us around increasing vegan and vegetarian offerings at the middle school. We're going to have a taste testing in a few weeks. As part of that, we were also looking at how we increase produce, organically rich, as well as vocational opportunities for some of our special ed students. So these racks are just a plug-in and watering, and my daughter's best friend actually has these in Milton High School, and they provide all the kale and the lettuce and the basil, and lots of pesto for the high school cafeteria. So I investigated the cost and the annual cost, and it feels relatively reasonable, and I think this would be a really good opportunity for the students, kind of farm to table, farm to school. Any questions from you?
Susie?
I guess I'm just looking at this, the final ask, the terraponic growing racks, those we could use from year to year, correct?
Absolutely.
And since that's, in my mind, a capital expenditure, how does that fall?
So
tied
it's
to
less
some-
than 5,000, so it doesn't
So it
meet the
doesn't
bar
fall
for
into-
capital, yeah.
That's what I was.
But it is one of those things that we can look at as we get towards the end of this school year, and we're looking at what we have for funds and purchasing and getting them in place so that they're ready to go for the beginning of the school year. Absolutely something we can look at.
And knowing we're looking at different pathways outside of the college track, because I love the ideas. I grew up in farmland. I mean, serious farm, but Jersey tomatoes, that was my first job. I was a tomato picker. So I just love this, but I don't know if, can we tie this in, eventually to some of our non-collegiate type pathways? Because most of my friends were future farmers of America and things like that. I don't know if we can partner with anything like that at some point or look into grants tied to it, but I do love this idea. It's kind of personal for me, so. Great, thank you very much.
Sue?
I actually love the idea of getting the students involved in something like this with growing food. I mean, it really is a great idea. I love it. So I look forward to seeing what you can do with it.
Great.
Really good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Lance?
Yeah, obviously, great program. We did something similar.
Oh, you
with
did?
With the Woolly Wall at the Y, and our kids loved
Okay,
it, and we
yeah.
grew year-round. So I highly encourage the hands-on learning that they get. That whole piece is great. So
Yeah.
the more we can do, obviously, I wear the nonprofit hat many times, and we would get sponsors to help this. Obviously, government's a little different, and we can't quite maybe go after that, but there's some great organizations or companies, like Sue said, that maybe we can look for partnerships that can help support. We had gotten involved with Puck Corners in Boston when we were there, and they helped. They were big into that, because obviously that's where their product came from. So there's ways to partner. I think there could be some opportunity there.
Yeah,
So-
and there's lots of grants. We've already got a whole list of grants. We missed a few of them, but we have a whole list of them. And actually, the cafeteria manager is taking a course to supplement this, and we're going to be having her come back to present the course materials to the students again, because we really want to continue to develop their voice and autonomy, and being the people that spearheaded this idea that now has grown.
That's great.
Yeah.
And just so I understand, you said 2.5, but what you mean is we're trying to make the social worker one
So we
whole.
have, yeah, so we.
So it's not two-
officially in the
it's not
operating
2.5
budget, we have, like-
positions that we
No,
have.
we have a .5 right now.
Okay.
And then another .5 got added in with some different
With the
funding.
ESSER funding, yep.
So right now it's a 1, and then we're trying to keep that, maintain
Yeah.
that 1. Gotcha.
Yeah, but have it be one person across the week versus like now. It's a little choppy because I'm trying to make sure that both people are available for kind of our weekly meetings and
So
meeting with
two
teachers.
two are filling the role of 1. Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Donna, thank you. That was great. Mark, I guess you're next, sir.
Fantastic.
I fixed the color for you too. The yellow was really bothering me.
I was going to say,
Thank you.
didn't
My
we
eyes.
just? I was going to say,
think it
didn't we
was
just
the-
replace all those?
Yeah. Loose connection there, loose connection.
Okay. So just here's the agenda. We'll talk a little bit about the enrollment, class size, and student support data, like the other principals have done so. And that's because that data really helps shape those priorities for the 23 budget priorities. And then we'll talk about the rationale. That forecast in 23 item should not be there, because I did that last year, so I'm just not taking that out, so. Here is the historical 10-year enrollment at the high school. Those trends reflect precisely what we're seeing in the other schools as well. There's been a bit of leveling off, a little bit of a dip this year, but based on what Donna just presented, it should stay pretty steady next year as well. But of those 774 students that attend the high school, about 20% of them receive some sort of a service on an educational plan, whether it be an IEP, on a 504, or because of their English language learner status. I would highlight the increase of 3% in the number of 504 plans. I believe, and Jess can tell me, those numbers are pretty consistent, if not below the state average, in terms of percentage of your student body. Below, yeah. Yeah. So relatively speaking, the numbers themselves don't really jump out, except the increase in the 504 plans, or 3% over the course of the year. Of that 3% increase, it's really social emotional needs, it's anxiety, the increase in anxiety and depression diagnoses. And as I'll talk about in the presentation, we are anticipating that to grow, and in large part, that kind of shapes some of my requests here for the budget for next year. Our class sizes, nothing particularly telling here. We're holding steady through most of those, but I want to talk a little bit about the math class sizes, if I could. At 21, and if you notice, it's a little bit higher than the English department, and I focus on the English department because they are very similar, and I'll talk about that in another slide. And I also will say that 21 class average is slightly skewed because math runs their math strategies courses a little bit differently than English and science. And so there are 4 sections, or 0.4 of a full-time teacher dedicated to math strats. If you take the math strats out, because those are very low class sizes, very low for a reason, you take those out, the traditional math courses class size is about 22. So that now puts us about 4 over our English classes, all right? And I'll tie that in a minute when I get to the rationale behind one of the requests. I've also teased out the world languages. In past years, I have presented that as an overall average for the world language classes. I wanted to break it out by world language to give you all an idea of where our students are electing, and I think where some of our resources should, where I'm requesting an increase in some of the resources there. The history class sizes are larger as well. We did reduce a history teacher a couple of years ago. Those numbers are holding steady. The electives are really driving that number up, right? Because we have a large number of history or social studies electives for sure. They're very popular with our students. And so that's why that number is high, all right? Because the elective-based courses, street law, sociology, psychology, and things of that nature. Genocide.
Just to clarify, class sizes of 18, 21, 22, 23 are favorable high school class sizes. And when we talk about what our class size ideals are as a school committee, and those of you that had a stint on negotiations will remember that we strive for 22 and under for grades K through 3, for 25 and under for grades 3 through 6, for 28 and under for the secondary. So that is kind of our number. There are obviously sections at the middle school that have accelerated that are over 28. There's some elective sections, as Mark alluded to, that are over 28. But in general, these are in line with what we have as class size
Less
ideals.
hurting needed at the high school.
Right, sure. Okay, so here and then lie my priorities. I am asking for an addition of a full-time teacher to help grow our COMPASS program. Our COMPASS program is right now it's a transition program for students who are returning to us from a long-term absence, long-term as defined by 5 or more days. Students use that program now, returning from everything from surgeries to mono, all the way to, and most importantly, mental health placements, okay? So I'll talk about in the next few slides the justification for that request. As I've alluded to already, I am also asking for the restoration of a full-time math teacher. We lost a math teacher in the budget cycle a couple of years ago, I believe. And just seeing those class sizes and the impact on those class sizes, I'm identifying a math teacher as a priority. I also identified the need for 0.2 FTE for world languages, and that's in the Spanish department of the world languages. A 1.0 educational technology integration specialist, a pathway coordinator for the pathways that we have discussed here at this committee level throughout the course of this year, and we've talked about hiring a program coordinator for that. That position would be ideally split, where perhaps maybe part of the responsibilities are teaching and absorbing some of the teaching loads that we think may come with the advent of these programs, for instance, in the business pathway, and the other half would be as a kind of a coordinating position, an oversight position, right? So dividing those responsibilities up. And then I've also put an item in here just to add some money to help continue the growth of our unified sports teams programs that really took off this year, thanks to Kristen Kelly and a bevy of teachers who just kind of jumped in with both feet. We now run a robust unified basketball program. This year we had a unified strength and conditioning program, and we're looking at unified track and field next. We're having hosting a unified bocce tournament next Saturday. And so there's a cost associated with that, certainly. And we got a grant to do so this year, and we'll get another grant next year, but the grant is a little bit less. And then in the third year, it's self-funded. So I'm just kind of asking for an increase in some line items there to help us support that program. And so the rationale for the Compass teacher, and I've explained this several times, so I do apologize to keep coming back, with the same concern. I am very proud of the paraprofessional who staffs our Compass program. She does a great job. But in alignment with our district goals of academic achievement and social emotional wellness, I'm looking to add a full-time teacher there to meet the actual growth in the number of students that require our support, but also the anticipated growth. And not only the growth in numbers, but the depth of the support that our students are requiring. As I said, right now it's a transition program. The goal is to gradually introduce those students back into their regular classes with a very prescribed period of time, 5 days, maybe 10 days, but by then we're hoping that students are ready to go back in. We are seeing an increase in the number of students who are getting stuck, so to speak, and who are having a harder time going back in. And we manage that on a case-by-case basis, for sure. We don't just throw them back in and say, too bad, kid. But as they're out of class for a longer period of time, despite the best efforts of the paraprofessional in the room, there's a lack of instruction there. And I want to add an instructional component to that program so that if we need to eventually, with an established exit and entrance criteria, create a home base for students. So on those days, and I know as Mike alluded to in his presentation, for the kids who come to us for whatever reason, dysregulated, they just can't get into the building. Or that once they're in the building, they can't mainstream throughout the course of their day. Okay, this is your home base. In those moments, you're going to come here, and you'll check in with this teacher. And if you need to stay there for, the day, we can deliver that education, like instruction to that student, rather than here's your work and let me support you. That's a good model when the student stay is temporary. But when we talk about a longer period of time, it's not as effective. And so ideally, that teacher that we would hire, while it's not a special education program, to be clear, I would think that I would look to hire a teacher with a special education background. Teachers in that career have a tendency to have a bit more knowledge of several content areas. I think about our own SPED teachers at the high school. Most of them are certified in more than one area, special ed obviously one, but in a content area, and some in 2 content areas. And at the very least, they have a kind of a general knowledge to be able to deliver instruction in such a way to students who are in need that they're more likely to retain that information, right? There's just a special training that goes along with that for those teachers. So it wouldn't be a SPED program, but I look for a special education teacher to run the program. In fact, as I was thinking about this presentation and looking at some of our Compass data, what I didn't include, and maybe I should have, we are seeing an increase in the number of CRAs that we're filing with the courts. The CRA stands for a Child Requiring Assistance. And there are a variety of reasons where families and or a school could petition the courts to assist students and families, and one of them is, school refusal. We have 2 students right now who are currently on an active CRA with Plymouth Juvenile Court. We have 2 more where petitions have been sent out, and we have 2 more that we're currently moving in that direction. We're not there yet, but moving in that direction. So that would be a total of 6 students who are just having a difficult time coming, and then if they do come, we're having a difficult time moving them on. A student who fits that profile would be a student that would benefit from this program. All right. And so in any event, as I look at data to kind of compare where we are now to where we were, if you look in the middle of that slide, last year, the 2022 school year isn't really comparable because the way we used the Compass program last year in our period of hybrid learning and remote learning, it just wasn't the same. All right, it was very much a COVID kind of, I'm coming back from quarantine kind of thing. Don't forget, we were in school every other day. So a student who was having a tough time getting into the building, it wasn't 5 days a week, it was really 2, okay? And even at that helped some kids actually to get into school because it was twice a week. So the data there really isn't helpful. I think the better comparison is to go back 2 years ago before the shutdown, and that was 2021. And I presented to this committee on, must have been a little bit early, but as of January 31st of that year, there were 10 students using our Compass program for mental health needs. Do you see that bullet point there? And so now here we are, as of March, so just about the same time of the year, a month later into the year, we're at 25 students who have used that this year. And so that's what I'm really focusing on. There is an increase in number of students who are accessing it for the mental health needs. And that really should be no surprise based on what we've discussed here, what our other fellow principals have talked about as well. Yes, there is an increase, and most of our kids this year are using it as a return from medical, but that is because of the number of kids who are using it after quarantining. Right, so they're coming back, and they use the Compass program in some capacity when they're coming back. I suspect that next year, that number will drop, right? The number of students using the program for medical will drop next year. Our adjustment counselors are seeing an increase in their caseload as well, as you would expect. And so together, they have 110 students that they see on a regular scheduled basis as part of a plan, okay? That does not factor into the number of students that they see in the moment, students who are dysregulated in the moment, who might not be on their caseload, so to speak, okay? But we use them when the moment arises, okay? Any questions on the Compass stuff or the?
Yeah, just, this is new to me, so just to help me sort of visualize the program, is there a space they go to, or is
Yes.
the program? Yes, so it's a set design space. How many students at a time do we see on a given day?
Good question. So, I mean, it's obviously a smaller room. It's designed to be a smaller setting, although we do have room in an adjacent room next to it to expand this. All right, there is room upstairs there. So any given period, there could be one kid in there to maybe no more than 5. 5 would be on the high side. In fact, that'd be very rare, I would think. But it's equipped to handle that. All right. Right now, most of our kids are in there perhaps for 2 periods, and then the goal is to mainstream them back. If a kid needs to be the entire day, that's fine. But at any given time, it should not exceed 5. So at the end of the day, she probably hit service maybe 15 to 20 kids in a given day.
And you sort of talked about moving forward, having some set plan as far as coming in, and are we seeing kids in there for weeks, months at a time, or?
So we are seeing some kids who, right now, there are kids who we have said, you have that room on an as-needed basis, right? We start off with a definite set period of time, and then we evaluate, and then we extend it again. Okay, then we evaluate. At a certain level, we'll say, this is the place for you to come when you need it. There's a process to get there. They have to go to guidance or administrator, and then we triage that, and we end up with them there eventually, you know. And I would say right now, the number of students that are doing that have access to that, I think it's at 4. Okay, and again, so I would consider those 4 students a candidate for what I'm trying to do here as we grow it out, okay? The goal is for it not to become this giant program of 25 kids as a home base. Not right now, certainly, you know, but as we inch towards the number of students, I think it's important that we have it.
Well, to me, it sort of sums up what we're trying to do with these students, the challenge of transitioning them, and especially if they're home and missing time, to be able to transition them back and get caught up.
Right.
It's a valuable program.
Yeah. And it's similar in a lot of ways to what the elementary schools are proposing, because again, it's the missed instruction piece. We're happy to support them, but they are missing instruction every time we do that. And I'm trying to figure the best way to get them that instruction and support them at the same time. Moving on to the math teacher request. Again, it once again aligns with the district's goal of increasing student achievement, and it also would bring them in line with the English department. Okay, they're both 4-year grad requirements. They are both testing subjects, high-stake testing in both MCAS and SAT. And so, to me, that, you know, we have 9 full-time English teachers and 8 full-time math teachers, even though really the departments are sisters that parallel to each other in terms of those student needs. It would lower those class sizes, and it would give us more flexibility with the math strategies. Right now, as I said, the math strategies program is a support class for students that are struggling in any math class in grades 9 through 12. If you're a junior and you're in pre-calc and you're struggling, we would look to put you in a math strats course that's run by one of our teachers, and the student could be there for 2 weeks or maybe a half of a term, but they would go to their calc class, and then they would, in the second period, go to this math support class out of their study hall. And then when the student feels that he or she's caught up, or I've grasped this concept, okay, then he goes back to a study hall, and hopefully is meeting with success in the pre-cal class. The challenge is, though, that we are offering fewer sections of Math Strats, which means it lines up with fewer students' study halls. If Math Strats meets period 5 and 7, and your study halls period 1, well, then I can't offer that support to you. Okay, so I'm just looking to add more flexibility as well. Give us a chance to maybe offer an additional section of Math Strats to allow more students access to that support class. Any question on the math? Before okay. The .2 Spanish request is because of the increase in class sizes in the Spanish classes. That average size of 20 is just that. It's an average. Some of our higher level Spanish classes, Spanish 3 and Spanish 4, they have larger enrollments in those classes. And we already have a Spanish teacher who is .8. I'm just requesting that we have the funding to move that back to a 1.0 teaching position, to take the burden off of some of those Spanish 3 and Spanish 4 classes. And then the Ed Tech Integration Specialist, I fully understand that the district committed funds to bring Mike Tinker on board last year, a wonderful addition. I think by design, he is focusing a lot of time at the elementary level. And what I hear is that great things are happening there. I'm requesting that an additional hire happens for grades 7 through 12, so that we can continue the work that we have started and really are committed to over the past 2 years. The Chromebooks and the additional devices throughout the district, and just our commitment to the Google Suite, and a lot of our education really now is kind of developed. Our lessons are developed with the SIMA model in mind, and having a tech specialist at the secondary level, I think, would help our teachers and our students a great deal.
Question, Susie?
No, I love what you're trying to do with the Compass program. We had long-term illness, and I know the value that it helped with us. I know we struggled kind of trying to understand it, so I think it's good to continue to develop it. I don't know what type of input you got from some of the students that have used it or continue to use it. Probably getting that perspective will help as you continue to tweak what you want to try to do with that. But again, it's very helpful, especially coming back from that, because as a parent, we didn't know if we should get a tutor. We didn't know how a lot of things worked. So I just love the idea, and as we're seeing the wave, as we hopefully are moving out of COVID, but the wave of what's coming as a repercussion, I think it's going to be instrumental in the success for our students. Super.
Agreed. Yeah, thank you.
Sue?
So what is I think that I'm with Susie on this, is a great idea, and, I love that, we're trying to emotionally support our students. What is the specialty of the teacher? Like, what is, I'm just wondering, as this teacher,
Should we call them a unicorn,
I'm looking
right?
for a unicorn,
Yeah.
someone who has absolute certifications in all of our content areas. We can do it.
It only costs $300,000, and you can get them.
I'm just,
ELL, whatever you got.
So,
Tough.
again, obviously, we would not find someone who has a certification in all those content areas. But generally speaking, teachers who come through the special education programs in colleges and come out certified in special education, there's usually at least one content area certification, and oftentimes there's more than one. All right. In our building, I'm thinking right off the top of my head, there are 2 of our special ed teachers that have at least 3 certifications, and they all have 2. So what I'm hoping that, and just using the models from other schools, they may not be content experts, all right, but they are instructional experts. And so they certainly are very good at taking material, breaking it down into manageable parts for students, and delivering content to kids in such a way that they can absorb it, the student can absorb it in a small setting. I'm less worried about a teacher understanding how to deliver content about the causes of World War II than I am about someone who can actually deliver that content to someone whose learning style is a little bit non-traditional. And so that's why I'm thinking about in the special education area in terms of looking for the person for that.
Mark, question for you tied to that. just knowing what different platforms we used as we had hybrid situations and fully remote situations. Can we capitalize on some of the things that we learned through that process to help supplement? Because I know the individual you had in the Compass room, it really should be a marathon runner, because, I mean, the going back and forth to the different classes, to go and get all of that information, to bring it in. And we're not talking about students that are one particular type of student. This could be anybody, in our case, because we've been very open about it. I mean, we had a long-term ICU stay. And there's a lot of things that came out of that have now made her especially unique. She's tested that program pretty hard, and she's had a lot of input to me, recognizing the values she got from it and the wish list too. We're big on, if you think something's working or something could be tweaked, give input type of a thing. But, to use some of these platforms, I think about the Edgenuity platform and things like that. These are things we had to help us through COVID or whatever, but there's so many different online learning tools that will help supplement this poor unicorn that's going to come in and try to help kids that are in calculus and kids that are in algebra and kids that are in, all these different levels and types of classes. It was remarkable what the individual in that room was doing, at least when we were using that.
That's right.
We were amazed. We were amazed at the running and the level of effort made. I mean, I think, having been in customer service, usually people call to complain. You don't get a lot of calls to tell you, like, wow, just literally running through the halls to go and get more paperwork and stuff. So if we can use any of the things that we did to get through this horrific couple of years to supplement and help that too from an instructional perspective, I think that will help our unicorn to maybe not be as tired.
Right.
I'm hoping that we'll be able to use some of that.
Sure.
I know we had to purchase certain things, but it's amazing what you pulled off, at least in our instance.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that.
I mean, I've done a lot of thinking about it. We've had 4 years to kind of think about the whole thing and how, what worked for us, what our wish list was, but recognize it's ever evolving. It's never going to be perfect, because who would have seen a pandemic coming on top of everything else? It's just kudos to everybody that was involved. The amount of effort you put in to help families like ours, it's unbelievable.
Right. I think the thing to keep in mind too, just about to Sue's question, don't forget, even though I'm calling it a home base, the goal is for always the student to be pushed into the student's regular classroom.
Yep.
And so if the student's there just for one day, one period, okay, Mr. Devil, I've got to get up there, okay, fine. I wouldn't envision the teacher then teaching that math class that day, all right? But if it's like 3 days in a row they've missed math class, at that point, I would anticipate instruction happen, but the instruction is going to primarily happen with the general ed teacher in the classroom. This is just to fill in those gaps because the student is there for 3 days in a row and then goes back in for a week and then goes in for a day, right? Those kind of things, all right? So unless there's someone out there who can do it all, which we'll certainly hire them.
Jump on
if
them.
we could. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Appreciate it.
Lance, any questions?
I touched on them. So is this automatic if I miss X amount of days, I am in the program, or how's the referral process?
So we'd have to work on an entrance and extra criteria for sure. We have one right now. It's very rough around the edges. Right now, it's case by case basis. As it stands right now, any student that is absent from school for more than 4 days, we hold a reentry meeting and then we offer the Compass program to them. Depending on how many days they're out and depending on how much work they're able to get done while they're out, we would then determine how many days or periods you're going to be in the Compass program. Once we set that time period, we always have a review before we exit the kid out. And the Compass coordinator at the time plays a big role, and the student does too, in determining, okay, is it time to move on or should we extend this stay? So what I'm envisioning in this program is someone who's gone through that process, establishing a criteria, benchmarks, where we'd say to the student, you know what, ultimately, let's shift you into the program, right? Here's your home base, and then carry it out from there, right? But right now, that there is an entrance criteria right now that we utilize, understanding fully the goal is to move everybody right out. Yeah.
And similar to the elementary level, are we tracking data to sort of evaluate the program?
We do that now, and we'll continue to do that, sure, yep.
And just for the record, I made the presentation. I'm hiding up in the corner.
Ah, you up there? Good. Awesome.
Perfect.
I love, I'm picking my daughter. It's Wednesday, sorry.
Do you have any questions?
I said, your daughter heard any questions, or she? Well, thank all of you, outstanding. The time and effort that goes into these presentations is amazing, and what you guys do, and the questions, and you know the stuff inside out, so I can't thank you enough, so I appreciate it. Shall we move on to a little surplus? We have a request. Basically, the conclusion of the projector and speaker install project, we have 75 surplus used plastic and metal carts. We have no use for the carts at any of the schools. Mr. Hall would like the authorization to basically remove the carts. They're taking up valuable storage space. The only question I would have is they have no scrap metal value or anything like that, or?
So the first thing we would do is offer it to other town departments, if there's a need there. And then we would look at recycling them, which includes scrap metal, and then whatever value is associated with them would get redeposited.
So we just need to say it's okay to do it
Yep,
then?
you just deem them surplus and we get rid of them in the best means necessary.
I will take a motion to deem this equipment surplus.
So moved.
From
Second.
Suzie, second from Sue. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, the ayes have it.
There's been no questions in the mailbox, that's what I've been checking.
No, that was my next little note to myself. We have everything?
That's everything. So you guys are not meeting next week. You're meeting on the 22nd, at which point Jess will do the student services budget presentation, and she's going to include in that the social emotional update that you've been asking for. For that meeting, I'll have that running list that we talked about what's been asked for so far. I think as we get into Jess and Mary Beth's presentations, you'll see some repeat asks, so it's good to see kind of where it came up first, whether it comes to through in theirs as well, so you can keep kind of a tally there. And we will keep going through the budget process.
Do we have questions, or you're good, or just our audience participating? Well, thank you for coming, crowd of one, that was fantastic.
You missed us, Maury, didn't you?
No, that's, so that's to adjourn?
Yep, you're good.
I would ask for a motion to adjourn the Wednesday, March 9th, 2022 meeting of the Pembroke School Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Well, any opposed? The ayes have it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Mr. Tropiano, I hope you enjoy your night off. and Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.